What is going on, everyone? Jason here from Mystical Tomes, and today I am actually really excited because I've seen this game played so many damn times, and I finally get the chance to play it. We were playing the game called Dagon, or Dagon, depends on how you say it. It's supposed to be a Lovecraftian video game, and I'm really excited to play this. So, we're going to dive into this. If you guys like my gameplay, my commentary, hit the like, subscribe, bell notification in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and let's get started. Dagon is a faithful, interactive adaptation to H.P. Lovecraft's work, focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along the plot. That's cool.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall...
One second, I gotta adjust the audio so that way you guys can hear me. There we go.
Be no more. Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
Well, that's depressing. Don't do that, man.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
So what he's seeing must have driven him so mentally freaking crazy that the only way that he could find comfort or a brief reprieve would be through morphine or death. That's crazy, though. That has to be like an insane amount of like mental mindfuckery there.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation.
I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not trying to take away from the story, but actually playing this and seeing the graphics, oh my god, look at that. The reflection of the sun or the moon bouncing off the water, the actual reflective surfaces of the water, the texture of the wood paneling on the ship, insane.
So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
It's smart. It's very smart.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
That is very bizarre and also mildly disturbing.
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
Well, absolutely, so would I, man. Like, first thing you do is wake up from a frickin', being baked into the sun all damn day, and all of a sudden you see this. Yeah, I'd be completely freaked out too.
For there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core.
As it should.
The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
The origins of Dagon. Dagon seemed to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Irvin S. Cobb, about unnatural infinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror in literature. H.P. Lovecraft. In Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. I dreamed that whole hideous crawl and can yet feel the ooze sucking me down. In defense of Dagon, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. In his own words, I hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected to it since I was 2 years old. But I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. The Dweller in the Darkness, Lovecraft, 1927, Dolan Wandry. I like how story-rich this game is. I'm actually really enjoying it.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position.
Now my question is, what the hell is that mound like, looking like it's rising and falling? Is that like a giant jellyfish or something?
Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
That is ballsy, but he is training into the unknown right now.
All day I forged steadily
The
westward,
hell are these things?
guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance.
I bet it did.
An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset.
I feel like this freaking little hammock, what he calls it, I really do feel that this is going to be just like a giant monster right here. I don't know why. Sorry for shaking the camera here, but I really do feel like this is just going to be a monster as he climbs it.
Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world.
Probably are. That looks like the edge of the world.
Peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent.
Oh, don't tell me you're climbing down there.
Whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature.
I would have to say so because of how smooth it is, yeah.
A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith.
I swear to God, if that's a prison for something, I wouldn't be surprised.
Whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
This
The
is very
writing was
interesting
in a
so
system
far.
of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in
I can barely hear this guy. There we go.
books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and characters' notes, The Shadow Out of Time, The Haunter of the Dark, islands emerging from the ocean, my bad, the Call of Cthulhu, or Cthulhu, as a lot of people are known for that because he has an alien dialect, that's probably what it sounds like, or fictional beings and deities based on real-life events and mythologies. Mygo in the Whisperer in Darkness. Also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. Fair enough.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint, grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size.
So there's 4 beings on this stone, and one of them I'm assuming is Cthulhu, which is that one right there, but the other 3 is unknown to me.
But in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What are we gonna get? What are we gonna get?
Last, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds.
I'm wondering if I could have full reign of the character after this. This would be actually fun to run away from, but very, very pointless because like 30 steps of us is like one step of it, so I'm pretty sure it'll be just pointless.
I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal, and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. Indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital.
I love the amount of detail they have for these buildings and architecture.
Brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention.
Do I not have a body?
Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing.
I'm just ahead, that's all I am. There's no body. Just ahead. There's no body right there.
Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a
Bro, come on, don't play with me like that.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Dagon, or Dagon, was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. I can't talk. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in the Assyrian poem and an underground prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's work, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the ocean. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. See, I love actually how they actually blend a lot of H.P. Lovecraft's work into this. They said they did that, and I was kind of a little skeptical, but they really did a great job on this, and I love how detail-oriented and story-driven this game is. Minimal action, all story. I love it.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
August DERLETH and the Cthulhu Mythos. August DERLETH was an American writer and anthologist. He has also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works throughout his company, Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. DERLETH was a devout Catholic. To the Cthulhu Mythos, which contrasted with H.P. Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's work are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. It is I can't talk today. I'm so sorry, you guys. It is also worth noting that the Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by DERLETH after the author left the mortal plane. That's actually really interesting because I didn't even know that. That's actually a really cool fact right there. I think H.P. Lovecraft just wanted to create Cthulhu and, you know, whatever else he made of the whole thing. I only know a certain amount of H.P. Lovecraft, and then DERLETH, from what it's saying, is there's like a whole entire mythology based on this, and that was like the counter opposite of what H.P. Lovecraft wanted. So that's kind of cool. Did not know that. Alright, there should be a circle thing here. Oh, there it is.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols, and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
That is crazy. That is really crazy.
The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me.
I'm not a big fan of that.
God, that hand!
That's a no.
The
That's
window!
A no, thank you. Alright, well that's the end of that game. If you guys like this gameplay, please hit the like, subscribe, and bell notification. I gotta say, this was an amazing game. It was mostly driven on storyline. It was minimal action, like I said earlier. That's one of the main things I like about this. That's all I can really say about it. I loved the atmosphere. I loved how detail-oriented it was. It was just really stuck on DERLETH and H.P. Lovecraft. It actually gave a lot more insight behind the authors, and that's what I really enjoyed about this game. If you guys like this, go check it out on Steam. I think this is the free version. If it's not, it's probably not that much, maybe a couple bucks, $5 if that. And yeah, I'm Jason from Mystical Tomes, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.